I'm Dr. Johnny Pierce. You can just call me Johnny, and this is the Actual Well podcast. And we're continuing our series of doing interviews over the month of May, so that we can share women's stories for Women's Mental Health Month. And today I am with.
Hi, my name is Melody Mann.
And Melody, what do you do?
I do a handful of things. During the daytime, I'm a PhD student at University of Maryland.
Okay,
I
represent.
study sociology with an emphasis on disability studies.
How about that?
And then outside of campus, I really focus on mental health research in the South Asian community, and I do poetry. So try to keep
a little bit of
balance.
everything. So for those of you who saw the interview with Supreet, this is one of the artists from the art exhibit that I actually got a chance to go to. And one of the things that stood out to me about your art was that it wasn't just poetry and it wasn't just a painting. And I believe you said it during the breakdown of everything that you actually did the poetry first.
Yeah.
So how do you bring together poetry and art to express whatever you're trying to get across?
Yeah, I would say that I don't view poetry as like just writing. To me, it's an art form of itself. So
Right.
I specialize in crafting words, and my goal is that you create the image you want in your mind. Like, it's not my job to dictate what your experience of my writing is.
How about that?
Yeah, my job is to basically paint what I feel in writing. And then if I want to have a visual, the visual is an extension of the words, but it's subjective to me, not what your experience is. And I take that lens also in research, where I'm not going to tell you what your experience is, regardless of what the law says or what your district or what your state may say. So I try to apply that also in art forms, which is why even on my social media platforms, you'll never see my face on anything. I do a lot of still life and silhouettes in terms of like photography, paintings, because I believe in like faceless, because you have the ability to determine what identity you want to give.
How about that? So this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We actually get her face on camera. So good for us. But with you doing that, you mentioned that you're studying sociology. Now, why were you drawn to sociology? What made you want to learn more about that?
Yeah, I've had a whole gamut of disciplines I've tried. I started off with child and adolescent development for teacher prep.
Okay.
I did my master's, like clinical master's in special ed, where I did 600 classroom hours. I'm like, I'm going to keep being a classroom teacher.
Okay.
Then I realized very quickly I'm powerless. I can't really do anything as a teacher because they always ask you, where's your citations? Where's your references? Who said that? What law is that? And I got really tired of this little finger pointing at me all the time. Yeah, I didn't like her. So I said, you know what? Let me go become someone that makes those rules so that way you don't come at me sideways. And I decided that I'm going to go for higher education beyond a master's. Let me get a PhD. I got tired of special ed after a little bit, so I said, okay, let me do psychology and let me explore what the brain side of things are. I learned in psychology we don't call disabilities disabilities. It's abnormal psych, abnormal development, atypical stuff. You look at the terminology and the verbiage, it's still really rooted in what we had in like the 80s and 60s. And the DSM-5 is not going to ever be DSM-6. So I decided after that, because my journey was stalled because my advisor left the campus.
That is always unfortunate.
Yeah, so I had to start over from square one. So I ended up picking up a second master's, like Pokemon card that I didn't need. So I have a master's in psychology. And then I started doing my PhD in special ed when I was at the University of Maryland. I quickly realized, though, my interest lies less within the routine systems that we have to abide by in education and in medicine. And I was more worried about just law and racism and how this stuff manifests for Black and Brown communities. And when you're in systems like UMD, like a top tier R1 school, there's grants coming in left and right, there's prestige, and there's wonderful things happening. But what about actual lived experiences and disparities that don't get documented?
How about that?
And when I bring those up, I would get told, no, we don't talk about that. Or, oh, no, incarcerated parents, their kids have autism. And I'm like, that's a big statement. And hearing these really bold statements and seeing how people federally will go into certain low privileged school districts and just take advantage of families and students for data, make millions of dollars off of it, and then leave the families as they are. So I decided, like, you know what, I think I have better alignment with sociology. It's not that I disagree with special ed, but I have this interdisciplinary lens where I think we can actually merge advocacy, we can merge history, and see how it's repeating itself.
I get you. So something that jumped out at me was you talked about the verbiage.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because I feel like a lot of the field is concentrated on pathology and what's wrong. and typically starting there and then trying to breadcrumb their way to wellness.
Yeah.
And my purpose in doing this pod is to highlight wellness at the starting point,
Exactly.
and just kind of understand these different experiences that people have, because what we might call pathology, sometimes this is a learned behavior.
Yeah.
Sometimes this is something a person did to survive.
Yeah.
And that doesn't excuse the need to maybe make changes to it, but it does maybe couch the way we look at it a little bit differently, so that there's more compassion, there's more empathy, and there's more understanding.
Yeah.
Because, when you put a label on something, you don't really have to understand it any further than that. It's good, it's bad, that's just what it is. And hearing your experience of like each step of the way, you're trying to figure out like, what's the best way for me to come at this? I see a lot of red tape when I go this route, let me go a different route. And then ultimately get into a place where you realize, oh, this is systemic.
Yeah,
This is not just a one thing or another. This is a systemic thing that is built around seemingly pathology.
Yeah.
So, being confronted with that, how have you stayed in the place that you stayed in, where you could be hopeful, where you could be interested? Like it sounds like every time a door got closed, you were willing to look for a window.
Yeah.
How have you done it?
It wasn't easy.
Okay.
I'm leaving out certain institutions and names and people for a reason.
Understandable.
Because,
share what you're comfortable with. Always.
I wasn't warmly accepted. I've been told things like verbatim, you've been accepted into this doc program because you are diverse. And therefore, I am not racist because I have a Latina colleague at the CDC and I accepted you into my program, so that doesn't make me racist. In front of a whole lecture hall. And I'm sitting there and my response was, had you been as inclusive as you say you are, I wouldn't be the darkest person here. And that's sad because I'm not dark.
Neither am I.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even that dark. But if we're going solely off of pigment, that's sad. That you consider this dark.
Right.
When I think I've gotten pretty fair over the years.
The wintertime's hard on us lighter folks.
Yeah, and that's the indication of diversity. I've also been dismissed from programs where I've been told that we can't accommodate your research. We don't have any ways to link you up with anyone. And I'll read, I'm like, university bylaws say if this were to happen to me, you have to let me branch out to other departments and continue my studies.
Right.
Because I'm performing up to par. So why are you letting me go? And they're like, we've decided we just don't want you. So we advise that you either walk away or find a new program. I've been told things in classrooms, even at the PhD level, that when I talk, you will look at me. When I'm speaking, you will make eye contact with me. And I'll sit there in my brown self and am I allowed to cuss?
Sure.
Fuck no. The fuck are you to tell me to look at you? And I'll sit there and I'll be like, I will not look at you. And I've had people yell at me in my face that I am talking, you will look at me. And I'm just there like a
power struggle for no reason.
Exactly. And I've looked around, I've turned around and said, I'm going to ask you to use your inside voice, please. And that's a teacher tactic, but it becomes demeaning because I just put you in a position of a child because you're having a tantrum.
Yeah, that
and
sounds
this
like
thing
a tantrum.
of like trying to always place women as the crazy brown or black lady. And that trope is so hard the higher you get, because if you disagree, apparently that's not accepted. You're not allowed to disagree. So how have I kept going? It's just out of utter bafflement. Like, wow, it's really like that, huh? Like you really don't like what little old me has to say. Like, I'm the most non-threatening person ever. I promise you. But I'm also from California. I'm from the Bay Area.
Okay, Bay Area.
That's just not how we're brought up, man. Like, I will tell you once, I'll tell you twice, I'll say it to you. That's not okay. And if it's not okay, I don't care what accolades you have. You're allowed to be wrong.
Right.
And in this generation, we just don't like being wrong. And we don't like being told we're wrong.
I wish it were this generation. I don't think it's exclusive to this
Not
time.
Not just generation. I guess this time and era we live in.
Yeah, we definitely have a pretty divisive time when we're living in. But, something that was awesome that came out of what you just said that like takes me back to my own upbringing. My mom said, be a respecter of character, not title.
Exactly.
So, if somebody's got a title, that's great. I'm glad you went to school. And as a matter of fact, part of the reason why I say call me Johnny and not doctor is because it took me 17 years to get my name. My name is so much more important to me than the degree. I got the degree in 6 years.
Yeah.
And I still owe a ridiculous amount of money in doctorate debt. But like, it's mine, and it's a piece of paper that's sitting on the set when I normally do my podcast.
Yeah.
But like, my name is so much more important to me because my character, who I am as a person, is more important to me. And too often someone gets a title, gets a degree, and that's what makes them special. That's what makes them unique or important. It's like, no, your value doesn't come from what you produce. It comes from your existence.
Exactly. And I see that a lot also, like even in like community cultures, when it comes to like academia or any type of field or trade, you get so engrossed in what you're doing. That's all the person is. And I've often asked people like, so what do you do outside of school? What do you do outside of this? And they're just like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear the conference. I don't want to hear the merit or anything. Like, what do you do? Like, are you
who
a
are you as a
baker?
person?
Do you cook? Who's your grandma? Who's your mom? What land mass speaks to you? Like, are you of a place? Are you of mountains of air? Like, what are you? Who are you?
Right.
And there's no response. And then I sit there and I'm like, wow.
Feels kind of hollow, right?
Yeah, it's hollow. And then I don't want to be that. I never want to define myself by schooling, by what I do. So oftentimes when I do meet new people, I don't even mention that I'm a doc student. I'll say it very vaguely, like, yeah, I'm in grad school. And if someone probes, I'm like, yeah, doc student. And if they get really nitty gritty, then I'll start answering. But it's not the first thing I want to present myself with.
Yeah, because that's not who you are. That's what you're doing.
It's what I'm doing. It's a passion of what I'm doing. But what I'm doing is because I was forced to do this. Because I never wanted to even go to college.
Really?
I'm a first-gen student. No, I worked at Pep Boys. I was offered a really good salary. I was going to be manager of like the auto body department. It was great.
Okay.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I was when I was like 17, 16.
Okay.
When I got that. So by the time I was 18, they're ready to give me the keys to the shop. And I'm like, I'm set. But then my mom's like, no, you're not set. And I'm just like, why? This is the life we want. And she's like, you're going to go to college. And out of just spite, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to college, but I'm going to do it on my accord. Not the way you want to. But all that to say, I think when you are in environments with people who struggle for this their whole life, and it's like everything they've worked for, I don't share that same position because I am here because the finger that kept pointing at me and telling me no. So I have to become the person who can also put up my finger and say, actually.
Well, actually.
Actually, exactly. So this little finger movement really got to me.
Gotcha. Now, is there anything about your own personal wellness journey that you would want to share, or that you had to use these skills in order to help you get through this process?
Yeah, I would say growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of just mental health issues, as you can call them, because we live in a medical system that also doesn't support you when you need it, and not in a culturally adept way. It's mostly rooted in like these Western frameworks of what health is, which is often a label, a diagnostic, and a prescription. We don't really think about holistic health, about like self-healing. What's the body's ability to talk through things, to build resilience. Resilience is also not a skill that's taught anymore. It's something that's coddled in a way. We're not taught about changing your mental script, changing the way you think and how you talk to yourself, your relationship with yourself. I've seen my friends complete suicide. I've seen my uncle complete suicide. I've seen a lot of schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar related manners that manifest sometimes with or without the diagnostic.
Yeah.
And I see how it's more common than you think.
Yeah.
You know, but we've made it something that's so uncommon, untouchable, a topic that you're not supposed to say that. And culturally, I'm Punjabi, right? You have to keep these things in the house. Don't let anyone outside know. Don't let your grandma know. Don't let your uncle know. And this fear that just gets intertwined with it is another reason why I radically am just unapologetically no. You're going to hear it. You're not going to like it, but you're going to hear it. Because if you don't hear it, you're never going to get used to it. So whether it was mental health trainings, I served on Active Minds for the California chapter for like a couple of 4 years, was it? I did a lot of mental health conferences going forward from that. Right now, I look at more contemplative psychology, and I look at like yoga and mindfulness and how that manifests in the K-12 education. And trying to see like how does that impact it, and also stigmas. How do we culturally associate stigmas when we think about topics like taking our life when it's normal? You know, for contrary to what they say, everybody has at one point like, man, I'm just gonna yeet myself. Like I don't really feel like doing this. But why is that so feared? Instead, we get into like the mandated reporter protocol. Have you considered taking your life? Have you contacted someone? You will have to call authorities. And we're bound by these rules. We're so bound by these rules. Versus actually just looking at someone and going, man, do you need a hug? Do you need an ear to listen to? Like we're not allowed to do that. So,
when you talk about conversations around suicidality, like I actually have a pretty point blank discussion with any client that is going through something like that, because I think these are two very different questions. I ask people, do you want to die or do you not want to live? And they look and I say, do you understand the difference between the two? And they say, well, yeah, I guess. And I'm like, well, if you want to die, I got to get you to a hospital, because we got this whole thing about being human where even though we don't help very much when, people are alive and struggling, we don't quite want you off of yourself. But when it comes to like not wanting to live, there's typically like an ellipses there. And then there's something that can be identified on the other side. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live with this anymore. I don't want to live around this anymore. There's something that we can actively work on from therapy standpoint. And getting to that is something that I've been very fortunate to have more opportunities to do. I think I've only had one client that I've ever had to send to a hospital, and thankfully that person didn't attempt or complete. So that topic of what does it mean to talk about suicide? How afraid should you get as a clinician? How afraid should a client be if they have that thought pass through their mind? How normal is it for people to have passing thoughts? How often do people actually come up with whole plans and never complete?
Yeah.
Never follow through? And why is it that men are more likely to use very, lethal methods, so they're less likely to attempt, more likely to complete than ladies? Like, what's going on there? And it's hard to have those conversations and we can't even say the word.
Yeah. With the taboo associated with the word almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you see it a lot now in like psychiatry and therapy and care when you have different perspectives and lenses and diversity and providers. You actually get those conversations like,
Right.
do you want to die or do you not want to live? Like that question was never asked to like my peers or even me when I was going through therapy. So like knowing that that's even a language, a slight shift can just change someone's whole perspective entirely.
That's what we're trying to do here. That's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to how can we do this stuff well?
Yeah.
Because whether you make the topic difficult because you stuff it and like minimize it and try to make it not exist, or you open it up and make it a bit lighter, it's not that it isn't still challenging. Because if a person is thinking about ending their life, whether they don't want to live or if they want to die, like it's still something that may be difficult to process. But if you can come to it with the goal of understanding instead of judging, like some of those safety protocols are all about judgment. Like I got to judge whether or not you have a sound plan to end your life if you got access to it and all that other stuff. It's like, whoa, we can get there. We can always get to judgment.
Oh, yeah.
Judgment can be in our back pocket. But if we delay judgment and we give ourselves a chance to get more data, more information, more understanding, we may come to find that judgment starts to evolve.
Yeah.
Because now I see the situation differently.
And judgment kind of evolves into compassion. The more you let it sit. Yeah.
It can. So something I've been asking everybody, because it is Women's Mental Health Month that I'll be releasing these interviews during. Can you think of any particular way that your identity, which you mentioned you grew up in the Bay, you're Punjabi, you happen to be a woman, and you've been in academia and had to deal with some nonsense, like all these different identities. How do you feel like they've actually impacted you, shaped you into who you are?
Yeah, that's a question.
This is the last one, so it's it's got to be big and grand.
That's a great question. I would say if I start off with like growing up in the Bay Area, being a Bay girl, I think that it was instilled in you from a young age, no matter how you look like, what you have, what ability or disability you may be, you're allowed to talk and you're going to scream. And people are going to hear you. You're going to have a spot at any table. If not, you're going to break the table and sit on it. You're not going to build a new one. No, you're going to sit on that rubble and you're going to show them that you can still thrive off of rubble.
Okay.
And I think that ideology carried me all throughout childhood up until high school, where I'm speaking up for myself no matter what's happening to me, just knowing that it's okay to be me.
Yeah.
When it comes to like my Punjabi identity, I think resilience is just rooted in my ancestry. I come from a family of immigrants. I come from a family with an agricultural background, a social background. When they upped in during the partition and they went through as refugees and they like traveled and tried to reroute themselves, which was where my poem came from, an ode to an immigrant woman, of just sowing their own soil, their seeds in soil so that their children can flourish. And they never got to attain their dreams that they wanted to because they was constantly trying to hustle and get by.
Okay.
So when you're brought up in that type of household, sometimes your problems, for lack of better terms, they get dismissed because, girl, what you complaining
Exactly.
about?
We all got problems.
You got a roof over your head, you have food on your plate, and there's not a world war scene outside that's splitting your country apart. Like, why are you complaining?
We know trauma. What you talking about?
Exactly. And that also is like a negative lens because generational trauma then accrues within women.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you don't hear the stories of women and what it goes through. And it manifests as chronic illnesses, stress, mental health issues. But I also see strength because no matter what they were going through, there was always a smile on their face while they did it. And I think that also carried me too, through whether it was like someone passing away, whether it was like adversities I mentioned thrown at me. It was like, I'm going to cry and break down later, but let me smile at you first and sit on the rubble and blend all my identities and show you that I'm still here. And I think that contributed to just how I take the punches, in better terms. If I think of my life as a scholar, I think I've gained the confidence to overcome my introvertedness and I can speak to crowds. I can sit in front of you, and after a little bit, I'll warm up and I'll get to where I need to be. But also just knowing that having the facts straight, having them where they need to be, and knowing that when you know your stuff, you're allowed to talk. You're allowed to disagree. And you can disagree with anyone in the room, because if you actually have everything lined up in a way that you know is right, you're allowed to be right. And I think that's the one time in my life I was ever told I'm allowed to argue. I'm allowed to be right. Not saying that like I'm some pretentious little kid that goes, I want to be right, but no, it's more of a
when you hear something that's out of whack, when you hear something that doesn't make sense, when you hear something that's not consistent or representative, if you don't have a voice, silence becomes acceptance.
Exactly.
So because I didn't say anything, the belief is that, oh, everybody here agrees. And sometimes it's okay to be that one voice. And I think one of the challenges I've had in my career is because I've often been the one black male in the room, is you get labeled as, devil's advocate or something along those lines when you see outside of the group think.
Exactly.
And given that I happen to be Christian, I don't like being called anything related to the devil, so I have a strong reaction to that. And it took a little bit of work, but I had somebody say that in passing, just kind of like, oh, I love that about you, Johnny. You always think outside the box. You're like a devil's advocate in here. And I'm like, no. We had to have a conversation about it. And I explained, like, listen, when I'm thinking outside of the box according to what you think, no, I'm just thinking critically. And I think that you're used to getting this consensus, this groupthink, and as a result, anything that's seen outside of that is seen outside of the norm. And no, let's not use you as basis for norm, because you're not basis for norm. You're someone who has critical thinking skills too. You have ideas. I have ideas. My ideas may differ from yours, and we may even be able to find common ground, but please don't label me. Try to understand how I came to think it, because I promise you, if you take the time to do that, you'll see where I'm coming from. Because I can see where you're coming from. I just don't agree. So, yes. But that said, if people want to learn more about Melody Mann, how can they go about doing it? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me. I have a website, melody-mann.com.
It's going to be a link in the description.
You can find me on social media, Solace Among Solitude. You can email me. I'm pretty accessible. If you look me up, you'll find me. I'm always willing to, whether it's mentor, hold space, have conversation, provide opportunities, give back. That's my thing. Whether I need to link you up with someone, talk to you, or you want to learn about anything regarding my journey, poetry, whatever it may be, I'm open to it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today. And to you, I say, please click like, share, and subscribe. And of course, hit the notification bell to let you know when the next one's going to drop. We are here at a lovely cafe. It happens to be a little warm outside, so we opted to stay indoors. Hopefully you can hear everything just fine. But like I always say, I want you to be well.